Good morning. Welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chewton, your co-host today, Mike Rouse. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
We're talking mostly today about the case of Benedict Rogers, a British Conservative Party activist who last week was not allowed to enter Hong Kong. The Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, says it was Beijing who blocked him and that immigration matters are handled by Hong Kong unless foreign affairs are involved. That was the message in Friday's programme. Mr. Rogers says he will set up an NGO to monitor the SAR, reporting on the city's progress on human rights, democracy and freedoms. What do you make of the case and the reaction in London, in Beijing and from our own administration? Is it a weakening of one country, two systems, or just a necessary step to keep out an unwelcome visitor? Give us an email with your thoughts. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. You can go to our Facebook page, that's Backchat and RTHK Radio 3, or you can give us a call on 233-88266, our telephone number 233-88266. Later we're going to be talking about the transport subsidy in the policy address and possible money back on your octopus card. Joining us now, we have Mr. Rogers, Benedict Rogers, who's a member, as I say, of the British Conservative Party's Human Rights Commission. Alvin Young's a legislator and party leader with the Civic Party, and Lawrence Ma, a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and others will be joining us in the course of the programme after 9 o'clock. Our email address, once again, if you want to comment, backchat@rthk.hk, and we'll read out those comments. Mr. Rogers, good morning to you. Thank you for staying up. I think you're in the UK, and it's small hours.
Yes, good morning. Very good to be with you. I'm very happy to stay up for something like this.
Okay, tell us about your visit. First of all, what were you going to do in Hong Kong? What was your plan?
All I was going to do was to meet with a number of old friends and some new friends and acquaintances to meet with them privately. And I had given the Chinese embassy the assurance that I was not going to undertake any public engagements, any media interviews. I was going to meet with them privately to hear their perspectives and to listen and learn about the situation in Hong Kong today.
Sorry, good morning, Mr. Rogers. Well, why did you tell the embassy this? What was the sort of course of this? Because you could have just flown in, couldn't you?
Oh, no, absolutely. I did not inform the embassy originally. The only reason I gave that assurance to the embassy was because, unfortunately, they became aware of my visit, and I don't know exactly how they became aware, but evidently somewhere along the line the information got out to them. And when they became aware, they were very concerned about my visit, and they made contact with me through a third party, through a British Member of Parliament, who called me to relay the Chinese embassy in London's concerns. And when I heard their concerns, I then gave that undertaking that all I was doing was meeting people privately.
Right. So, if you knew you weren't going to be allowed in, why did you come?
Well, I received a series of messages through this third party, through this Member of Parliament, initially expressing concern, secondly asking for information about my visit, which obviously I did not give, except that I gave these assurances that it was a private, personal visit. I would not undertake public engagements. And then I did receive a warning that I might not be allowed in. I took the view that, first of all, I didn't know how serious the warning was and whether it was just a threat to deter me from even attempting to go. But I took the view that if it was a serious threat, then
it should be tested.
The Chinese need to do this publicly and openly and officially in the eyes of the world. And so I wanted to see what would happen. I had hoped that it was an idle threat and that I'd be able to come into Hong Kong. But in fact, what turns out was that they were serious about it. But I wanted to test it and to make sure that if I just gave in to it at that stage and said, well, I won't go to Hong Kong because the Chinese embassy tell me not to, then nobody would ever know about China's interference in Hong Kong's immigration policy.
Are we getting the whole truth here? Because, I mean, you said you were just coming here for some private meetings with friends, but you're an activist. You've met with these. You're politically engaged. You're politically engaged with the life in Hong Kong, and now you've said you want to set up this NGO. You were involved in advocacy. You met all these people in London and so on. You've released statements about this. You weren't here to see your auntie.
I wasn't coming to see my auntie. That's certainly true. But no, I'm giving the full truth in the sense that the people I was intending to meet were a combination of people I've known for a long time who are old friends and people that I've come to know more recently. Yes, many of them, most of them, were politically active people, and I wanted to hear their perspectives on the situation in Hong Kong today. But the point is that all of the meetings that I was going to have were private meetings. I was not going to do anything provocative or public or controversial. I was going to be having dinner and lunch and coffee with politically active people, which one ought to be able to do if Hong Kong is an open society.
Were some of your friends, old or new, in prison?
No. It is correct, and I have said this in previous media interviews, that at an earlier stage in the preparation for the visit, there had been some discussion of whether or not I could visit Joshua Wong, Nathan Law, and Alex Chow in prison. It became very clear to me more than 2 weeks ago that it was simply not going to be possible to do that. And so I had concluded that I would not do that. In the exchange of messages with the Chinese embassy over the days prior to my visit, I had assured them that I would not be visiting any prisons. I would not be attempting to visit Joshua, Nathan, or Alex. So I'd given that undertaking, both to reassure the Chinese embassy and because I knew, in fact, it wasn't going to be possible to do that anyway. So that was absolutely not in my plan for the visit over the if it had happened over the last week.
I mean, if you'd got here and had sort of fronted up at Stanley Prison or wherever they're being held and said, he wants to see me and I want to see him, could you have been stopped? That would have been a matter for the...
Well, I would not have done that. I would only have gone to visit one of the three if I had been assured in advance that there was a way of doing so, and it was clear to me, as I've just said,
right,
that it was not going to be possible to do so.
Because I'm trying to put my, if you like, Chinese official's hat on. I'm not a Chinese official, but I'm then relying on your assurance, because if you had gone to the prison to see one of them, there's no way that would have escaped media attention, is it?
Well, that's true, but I mean, I had given that assurance, and I had given an assurance that all of my meetings would be
right,
private meetings. And to be honest, I mean, even if I had taken the course of action you've just described, which I wouldn't have done, but even if I had, the prison I'm sure would not have allowed me in, so it really wouldn't have been an issue.
Although they would have allowed you in if the prisoner, it was visiting time and the prisoner said he wanted to see you. But then, of course, the media would have been waiting for you when you came out. That's all. So I'm just trying to think if I were suspicious that it's really they're doubting you. Frankly, this ban on your entries has made you famous, Mr. Rogers, hasn't it?
Well, to be honest, I think the ban on my entry has been actually very counterproductive from China's point of view. If they just allowed me in to see the people I wanted to see quietly, I'd already told them I wouldn't make a fuss, it would all be private. Very few people would have ever known. And So I think it has been counterproductive for them.
I mean, that's a point.
It depends what your ultimate aim is, I guess. But how does this reflect on the basic law? Because we talked to the chief executive about this on Friday, and she said very clearly this is foreign affairs, or this has been determined to be a matter of foreign affairs, and it's kind of out of the hands of the Hong Kong administration. Your thoughts on that, Benedict Rogers?
Well, I think it boils down to a profound misunderstanding over the status that I have and the nature of my visit, and actually an exaggeration of of the importance that I have. The Chinese embassy clearly thought that I was traveling on behalf of the Conservative Party and that it was some sort of official visit. And again, in this exchange of messages between an intermediary, I made it very clear that I was not coming on behalf of the Conservative Party. I certainly wasn't. I have no role on behalf of the British government, and that it was a purely private, personal visit. Obviously, they didn't believe that, but on the basis of what I said, that it was a private visit, it really should be no foreign policy matter at all. I'm a private citizen. I used to live in Hong Kong for 5 years, and I was coming back. Okay, I was coming back to meet some politically active people, but I was coming back essentially to meet old friends and to visit the city that I've lived in for 5 years.
Okay, well, let's go to Lawrence Marr now, a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia. Good morning to you, Mr. Marr.
Morning, Hugh, and morning, Mike.
What's your reading on this and that foreign affairs decision?
Well, everyone seems to think that entering Hong Kong is a matter of right. Now, only permanent residents of Hong Kong has the right, and the Department of Immigration has always a discretion to refuse entries to non-permanent residents and non-residents. They do not have a legally enforceable right. Let's get this clear. Hong Kong government has a discretion to disallow entry, and if people come in not for genuine social, business, or leisure purposes, they can and have been on many occasions refuse entries. For example, for economic asylum seekers, for example, in 2016, we've tightened up entries for Indian visitors because many of them comes in using false information. We have denied entries for people who come in for political purpose. For example, in 2006, a bunch of Falun Gong organizers from Taiwan wanted to come in for a conference for cultural purposes, quote and unquote, and we've refused entry. Now, under the Basic Law, Article 13, foreign affairs obviously is a matter for the central government. We are only a region. Now, having said that, it seems we have more information now, being told by Mr. Rogers that he had actually got messages from the Chinese embassy in London. And then he was advised not to come, but he wanted to test or take the chance to come and want to see what will happen to him. Now, it seems that that message is pretty strong, as it was conveyed by the embassy there through a member of parliament in England and then to him. So, I mean, it is pretty clear. Now, with respect to the personal capacity, may I say this? The title of a deputy chair is a personal title. It has no independent existence unless it is being bear upon by a person. You can't separate the title from a person. If you separate the title from a person, the title doesn't exist. You can't put the title on to, say, for example, an apple. And there's no media value had it not for Mr. Rogers' title being the deputy chair of the Conservative Party's Human Rights Commission.
Right. Now, of course, all governments have the right to refuse entry. I'm sure the British government does it from time to time too. But in this case, Hong Kong's done it in the past, as you said, as is its right. But the issue here was quite interesting, I thought, was that it wasn't the Hong Kong Immigration Department that decided that he shouldn't be allowed in this case.
Yes.
It was, in fact, the central government which passed along saying, OK, this is a matter of foreign affairs and we've decided he can't come in.
Yeah, if you read back the statement of the Foreign Affairs spokesperson, there are two reasons she has cited. First is whether this person's trip to Hong Kong involved an intention to intervene in Hong Kong's internal affairs, and two, judicial independence. And then she said that he knows very well himself.
Sorry, well, let's set aside the judicial independence, but intervene in Hong Kong's affairs, what does that mean? I mean, you meeting somebody, talking with someone, is that intervening?
Well,
he said that there was, and I think all along there was no indication he was going to give any kind of press conference or public event.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, we it seems that we cannot stop. Once a person is entered, for every matter in immigration is this. If you enter the country, I mean, unless you have conducted something illegal, you are at liberty to do everything you want, including all sorts of political activities.
Right.
Now,
and the problem with the Hong Kong media, I'm a member of the Hong Kong media in some respects, once somebody's here, I have the right to ask that person questions.
Yeah.
So it might be Mr. Rogers' intention not to give a press conference and not to have any proactive
and the media
contact.
cooks up stories, for example, because of his presence.
Okay, I mean, you compared this with, people turning away overstayers. Well, that's different because, of course, that's within the ambit of the Hong Kong immigration authorities. There's no kind of comparison there. And when it comes to something like Falun Gong, well, they would be members of an organisation which is banned on the mainland. The Conservative Party is not banned on the mainland. What would be the possible justification for... I mean, Mr. Rogers is not talking about Beijing. He's not talking about independence either. Let's make that clear. If you look at the people he's been in contact with, that's not his focus. He seems to be interested in democracy, democratisation, and only, you could argue, the realisation of the promises made in the Basic Law. Why keep him out?
Well, I would have thought that the only information we've got is a statement from the spokesperson. I can't speculate on what sort of more information that the government or the mainland government has on him, or with respect to his histories and with his past contacts, with respect to his previous activities in this under the name of democracy. So I mean, we can't speculate on what sort of information that the government has to make that decision to deny.
But then you get the situation you see where Carrie Lam was saying, well, they don't make these decisions arbitrarily. But we have no idea whether they make them arbitrarily or not. We have no indication, we have no transparency, we have no knowledge of why this decision was made, of the background to the decision or anything, really.
Well, for these sort of matters that may bear on national security, the courts wouldn't have a jurisdiction to review in many countries. And
that's not how we want to run Hong Kong, though, is it?
No,
that's not rule of law. Rule of law means means knowing what's going on and having transparency and having it out in the open why decisions are made. This is completely the opposite.
Hugh, even in Australia, national security matters are not reviewed by the court, whether you like it or not. I mean, of course. I mean, if we want to challenge that in Hong Kong and say, hey, all national security matters and all foreign affairs matters should be reviewable by a court of law in Hong Kong, then we can take this up on judicial review, and then we got to face ourselves with Article 13 and 14. Defence and foreign affairs is not a matter within Hong Kong court's jurisdiction.
Actually, all the time, immigration authorities refuse to give information about individual cases, don't they?
Okay, Alvin Young from the Civic Party. Good morning to you.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Thanks for joining us. So, what do you make of this? I mean, the Basic Law says that that Hong Kong may control immigration. It doesn't say that every person who wants to to enter Hong Kong, that decision is solely made by the Hong Kong administration. There is a role for Beijing in this.
Well, but there's always been a practice that Hong Kong immigration is the matter of Hong Kong government to decide, and especially in the case of Mr. Rogers, who has no public office, who is simply...
Well, no, it hasn't always been... No, but it hasn't always been up to Hong Kong to decide, as we've been hearing. Falun Gong, Kuomintang, Ma Ying-jeou, or something like that, he was denied entry. There are cases in the past where, and this is just another, really, where Beijing has made the decision on the grounds of foreign affairs.
But what Mr. Ma has just mentioned, the cases that Mr. Ma has cited, were rebutted by you gentlemen. Falun Gong is banned in the mainland. That's something that can be justified to a certain extent. Not that I support that decision. And is the Conservative Party a bandit organization in the mainland or in Hong Kong? No. And not to mention that Mr. Rogers, a private citizen who has no public office, is conducting private visits in Hong Kong.
No, Alvin, if you present yourself as a member of the governing political party's body, the Human Rights Commission, isn't that a kind of public office?
Well, I wouldn't think so. And remember, if I may also add this particular point, a lot of people with public office, like myself, travel around. And those visits, usually, unless they are for official purposes, they are all deemed to be private.
Yes,
So,
well, if you go somewhere on holiday, that's fine. But if you're a member of a particular body that's taken a particular interest in a political issue in the destination place, and you're going there to meet friends, old and new, I just think it's a legitimate fear to have a dotted line between your proposed visit and political affairs.
well, if that is the line drawn by the Chinese government and Hong Kong government, which agreed to Beijing, then they have to make it very clear and send a very clear message to the rest of the world. Never forget, every year Hong Kong is a hub. We have thousands and countless of visitors. They could be on official or private purposes. We don't know. Sometimes that
Right.
purpose could be mixed. And how about Chris Patten? Take Chris Patten as an example. He's a lord, of course. He's a member of the parliament
Yes,
in
he
that
is.
sense.
And he's been here many, many times and eating his custard tarts and selling his books and making speeches.
And on the other hand, meanwhile, Chris Patten is also here making, giving interviews and commenting on Hong Kong politics.
Yep.
So would Mr. Patten or Lord Patten, in that sense, be considered as a private citizen or otherwise?
Lawrence Ma?
Well, I would have thought that the central government has sent out a very loud and clear message in this occasion. There are, if you check, there are 46 million passengers coming through the air by plane every year. And only this Mr. Rogers knowingly is being denied. I mean, of course, there are other asylum seekers, as I said before, being denied. But I thought this would be a very clear message that somebody who wanted to or appear wanting to come in to meddle with our affairs, internal affairs, he would be banned.
Okay, Mr. Rogers, do you want to just come back on that? Benedict Rogers?
Well, I mean, the idea that I was coming to meddle in anything is really absurd. I mean, if having lunch and dinner and tea and coffee with people privately is meddling, then yes, I suppose I'd plead guilty to that. But I mean, that's a strange definition of meddling, really.
Yeah, I think that what this comes down to is an issue of credibility, that because of your past activities in Hong Kong and your current activities in the UK concerning Hong Kong, maybe the embassy just didn't believe you.
Well, I don't know about my past activities in Hong Kong. I don't think there's any reason at all for the embassy to be suspicious. I lived in Hong Kong for 5 years. I worked as a journalist. I visited several times over the years since I left. And in terms of recent comments about Hong Kong, then, I mean, effectively, the Chinese embassy have said anyone who criticizes China and criticizes and expresses concern about the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong could be denied entry. I mean, that's essentially the grounds on which they've denied me entry.
Lawrence Ma, is that right?
Well, I mean, we talk about freedom. As I said before, there are 46 million people entered Hong Kong in 2016 by air. And the total number of people who entered Hong Kong...
What has Mr. Rogers done? What has Mr. Rogers done except express concern about freedoms in Hong Kong?
Immigration is not what you have done, or you have... immigration is really about the threat or the things that you may be doing on the balance of probabilities that you will be doing, that really concerns people. And that's how immigration works. I mean, you can't wait until a person to enter the jurisdiction or the territory to arrest him or otherwise let him do things at will to damage the place.
Mr. Rogers, are you aware there could be a downside to this? And if you set up something like an NGO that you've described to monitor and discuss Hong Kong and advocate for Hong Kong, that people are going to say, well, this is proof that Occupy was orchestrated by outside forces and so on. It's the colonial powers who are meddling, who are running things, who are stirring up trouble, and that could be counterproductive from your point of view.
No, I don't agree at all. I mean, first of all, I want to be very clear. I had absolutely nothing to do with Occupy. In fact, my re-engagement with issues to do with Hong Kong has come about since the Umbrella Movement or the Occupy movement, because it caught my attention and my concern. And in terms of the NGO that we're working to set up here, it will exist to be a voice for Hong Kong people to raise awareness and to advocate and speak out to the world about the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong.
But was it known that you were going to set this up before you came?
It was. I don't know if it was known. It's been planned for the last couple of months, so it's certainly not.
I think it probably was known then.
To the events of the last few
and
days.
In your private lunches and coffees with people in Hong Kong, would you have discussed their involvement in this commission as well?
Well, it possibly would have come up, but no. I mean, the purpose for meeting people was to hear an up-to-date perspective from a wide range of people, from people of representing a variety of views about the issues that affect Hong Kong today.
Okay, well, Benedict Rogers, thank you very much indeed for joining us and staying up. Remember, as we've heard of the Conservative Party's Human Rights Commission in the UK. Thank you to Alvin Young as well, leader of the Civic Party. We're going to stick with the topic and share some of your interesting emails as well after the news at 9. Also going to be talking about Octopus Money Back and the transport policy later in the programme. Quick look at the weather now before the news. It's going to be cloudy today with occasional showers and sunny intervals. 27 degrees at the moment, relative humidity 96%.
The projections suggest the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany party only just got the minimum 5%. You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Monday morning with Mike Rouse and me, Hugh Tiverton. We're continuing to talk about the case of Benedict Rogers, the British human rights activist, whatever you want to call him. He was on in the first part of the programme this morning. He was denied entry to Hong Kong on Wednesday last week. Made a big fuss here, of course, and we talked to the chief executive about it. In our phone-in on Friday, she made it clear that this was a decision made by Beijing. It was nothing to do with Hong Kong. What do you make of that? What do you make of him, the decision? You can email us, backchat@rthk.hk. We'll read out your comments. You can call us on 233-88266 or go to our Facebook page as well. I haven't checked that. I better check that now. That's Backchat on RTHK Radio 3 if you want to comment there. Let's look at some of the emails. Mike says, most Hong Kong residents don't want outside agitators sticking their noses in our business anyway. After his telephone interview, this is a no-brainer. His barring seems justified. That's what Mike says. Pete asks, how did the Chinese embassy know that Mr. Rogers was coming? That's an interesting question, Pete. Mr. Rogers said somehow they knew somehow. I don't quite know how, although he had talked to people in the UK explaining that he was going to come, and somehow it's a good question, how the embassy came across this news. Simon, in an email, says, I listened to the Backchat programme this morning, that's on Friday, in which you have the chief executive field questions from yourself and the public, and I'm hoping as a consequence of her comments, RTHK could press for guidelines from the Hong Kong administration concerning the issues that constitute a foreign affairs breach for foreign residents, foreigners with a work visa or foreign travellers, so we can be certain not to engage in unlawful activity. For example, is wearing a yellow ribbon a foreign affairs issue? Posting critical comments on a news website, writing to a government department to complain about maladministration, financially contributing or participating in, say, a pro-equality of marriage debate, or taking taking part in a pride march or participating in a lawful march that expresses solidarity for genuine universal suffrage. There are a number of potential pitfalls, and it would be useful to have clear guidelines to ensure we do not breach the shifting and changing laws of Hong Kong. I look forward to hearing you. That comes from Simon. Thank you very much indeed for that. Bowen says, Benedict Rogers' announcement that he would set up an NGO to conduct advocacy work for Hong Kong is a belated effort in British political circles to exert international pressure on China to keep the sign a British joint declaration and respect the basic law. The point is that if nothing like that is done, how are we going to get through the rest of the 50-year term now that we haven't even reached the halfway point? That China is clearly and unequivocally is showing clearly and unequivocally its intent not to regard itself as being bound by the concept of one country, two systems, as originally understood, has been manifested by a string of events. The State Council's white paper issued in June 2014, statements by Chinese officials that the joint declaration was by then a mere historical document, the MPCSC 831 decision in August 2014, the MPCSC's unprecedented interpretation last year of the Basic Law prior to the beginning of the hearing of a court case, the setting up of a mechanism in the route to be taken in the co-location issue by which the MPCSC can endorse an action plan that's widely seen as being in breach of the Basic Law, and Beijing's open statement justifying intervention into the entry of Benedict Rogers himself into Hong Kong. Earlier this year, Lau Siu-kai spelled out in a radio show a list of China's objectives in coming up with the concept of one country, two systems and entering into the joint declaration, starting presumably with the most important, which was to facilitate China's resumption of sovereignty over Hong Kong, to the least important, which was to develop democracy and protect the rights and freedoms enjoyed in the city. The writing on the wall was that now the most important objectives have already been achieved. Those lower down the ladder can be tossed aside. That thought comes from Bowen. Joining us on the line now, we have Edward Chin, who's a founder and convener of Hong Kong 2047 Monitor, Patrick Poon, who's a China researcher with Amnesty International, and Lawrence Ma is still with us, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. Mr. Chin, good morning to you. Hello. Good morning. Hi, thanks for joining us. What do you make of this? Is this significant? Is this just something that we've come to expect from Beijing, this kind of decision over immigration? Is there anything special in what happened?
Well, maybe it's because the timing of Ben's visit is so close to the 19th National Congress, and if you read the recent publication of The Economist, talks about Xi Jinping as the most powerful man. I don't know. But to me, it is really a surprise. I was supposed to meet up with Ben Rogers as a private citizen, just to have lunch, basically an after-dinner drink with Ben at FCC Wednesday night, and then Friday we have a private meeting. But, this denial of entry, maybe it worked out to the best in the end. He became more like an international fame for the minute type of person. But, Ben has done nothing wrong coming over to try to understand the situation in Hong Kong. But to my surprise, this ban, shouldn't be done. But as I alluded to earlier, it works out to the best.
Well, it's rebounded on, hasn't it, on whoever made the decision, because someone that no one or most people have never heard of is suddenly on the front page.
Yeah, he is on Apple Daily and every place. But what I'm more concerned about, though, is if it is a private business person from overseas who is more vocal about doing business in Hong Kong, because of that person, if he is vocal, would later on, if Article 23 is implemented, would his bank account be freezed because of, being vocal about trying to uphold what is said in the joint declaration? That could happen. That's something that scared me.
Well, I think he's quite clear now. He's been talking about, as he told us earlier on the show, he was setting up this NGO which was going to... And he seems to have reached a conclusion already about the erosion of freedoms. He didn't say he was going to monitor what was happening with human rights. He was monitoring the erosion of them. That seems to me he's decided already what the conclusion is.
Of course, there's an erosion of freedom in Hong Kong, and also
is there?
The press freedom. If you read the Penn report and every other report in the last 2 years, we know the press freedom is under threat, and also, with Beijing's influence, with the Causeway Bay booksellers case.
I don't feel under threat. I don't feel under threat. Do you feel under threat?
I think, Hong Kong should not really mirror Macau, with Macau just a few weeks ago banning journalists from getting in, and now because of this Ben's incident, that it's more like a wake-up call to me. I don't feel comfortable, honestly, because the 2047 Hong Kong monitor group, there's a lot of people who are from regulatory background, and also people who are fund managers, whether they are long, short, or traditional funds, because if they become vocal about Hong Kong, talking about different things, what about an analyst who is vocal about freedoms, and then he'd go to China and then talk about downgrading, a certain company, and then suddenly because of him being vocal, and then he is banned from leaving China. These are things that we should worry about.
Well, I have a friend in one of these ratings agencies who has been busy downgrading China for a while now. He doesn't seem to be intimidated. Shouldn't we just do our jobs?
I think our job is to let more of the likes of Ben Rogers coming into Hong Kong. I mean, Ben, to me, is just a normal person, international travel, business. Well, he's not in business. He is an advocacy. He is a human rights activist. But, coming to Hong Kong, he goes to other South Asian countries too. I mean, that's part of his job. Just let him do his job. I mean, I don't see him as a threat coming to Hong Kong.
Well, I would have let him in. Let me get that on air now and out there. I wouldn't have stopped him coming in simply because who cares? But somebody felt that it was he was straying into foreign affairs. Well, maybe this is a good time to bring in Amnesty International. We've got Patrick Poon on the line. Good morning, Patrick.
Hi, morning.
What's your reading of the whole thing?
I mean, the whole thing is pretty odd to me because it's not the first time the Hong Kong immigration blocked people from entering Hong Kong. But you see the pattern is actually blocking people who work on human rights. And I don't see the reason why that they need to block people who work in this field. And actually, you can also argue that also you see when you also mention that you don't see any threat, but actually what threat actually you can see from human rights workers. So I mean, I would argue why they single out the human rights community and block people working in this community, and even to the extent saying that it's an issue of foreign affairs. It's really ridiculous to say it's a kind of foreign affairs because it's really all about how Hong Kong government use its discretion to handle its own manner of and also its own issues of immigration, and whether they allow people to enter Hong Kong is also something about the city's reputation. So I think it's something really alarming. It's not just for now, it's a single incident. Whether you see whether Ben Rogers is famous or not, or suddenly become a celebrity because of this. But the problem is why single out human rights workers? It's really also a big problem, single out human rights workers and activists. Why not others? And what also you imagine, what if Carrie Lam herself is blocked when she entered England? And can she say that it's because, the British government can also have their own right to do so because it's the question of the government?
Well, I think if there's a lot of speculation about Chris Patton already in the media and earlier on the show, but now you're raising the possibility of Carrie being banned from the UK. I think it's rather unlikely.
I think they should do that. I think the UK should do that. Ban Carrie Lam from entering the UK.
Well, is she going in her capacity as the chief executive of Hong Kong, or is she going on holiday?
To make it clear, I'm not encouraging it, but just saying by comparing it why single out human rights workers and activists? Then why all of a sudden we think it's normal to do so? So we really need to continue to question why human rights activists and activists is such.
You're a human rights activist as well, aren't you?
Yes. Yes, of course.
And you are yes, of course. That's what Amnesty International is about. And you're doing your job. Do you feel intimidated?
Well, I mean, the intimidation, of course, is not immediate because it's not. I'm not traveling to, for example, I'm not traveling to mainland China immediately. So it's really something everybody would need to rethink whether they need to go to certain places, and it's something really not normal. We need to ask the question why we need to rethink. Because, I'm working on human rights situation in China. If I think about if I want to travel to mainland China, I need to rethink whether I will be blocked as well. So I mean, like, it's really something like question we all need to ask. Why people need to rethink where they want to go when actually they are not committing any crimes at all.
Right, but you're a Chinese citizen and you have a home return permit?
Yes.
Well, then you can go, can't you?
Well, I'm not saying that I can go now, but actually, like, if I go now, nobody knows what will happen to me because it's something like there's been like reports about people working on human rights in China that they were blocked from going to mainland China. So it's just like similar to this case because Ben Rogers say something on Hong Kong's human rights, and also because he supported the Human movement, and also Georgia Wong and others. So he was blocked from Hong Kong. So I think like, and also Carrie Lam's comments about Beijing make the decision. It's something really making it very clear who actually is behind the whole scene. Then why don't we be like asking questions why we allow Beijing to do this? Because it's not just about one or two persons, but it can be like human rights people or people who work on human rights will need to rethink whether they will be blocked by the Hong Kong government if they come to Hong Kong.
Okay. Well, we've had quite a few emails and comments on our Facebook page, which we'll get to over the course of the programme. Backchat@rthk.hk is our email address. Ravi says on Facebook, perhaps it's time to tell the central government to grow up. The Hong Kong government is very much handicapped in this case and has a tough job justifying the decision of Beijing. The question is, will Beijing listen to anyone? If not, Hong Kong's slide will continue. Sad. TC says, again, the authorities in Beijing and Hong Kong have made some obscure individual famous. With all due respect to Benedict Rogers, he wouldn't have gained such notoriety in Hong Kong had this not happened. More importantly, I'm not sure what foreign affairs are involved in this case. We've got a caller on the line now. I think Susan. Susan, good morning to you.
Yes, good morning, Hugh. Yes, I'm here. I just wanted to give a factual example of a private meeting with Ben Rogers. I was due to meet him at breakfast last Friday, and I am an old friend. I don't think I'm considered to be a political activist. I knew Ben when he was in Hong Kong in the 90s, and he was working on legal journals that I used to write articles for, and we were going to meet at breakfast and have a chat. Yes, I believe in democracy for Hong Kong. And yes, I am very upset about the erosion of freedom of expression in this case and other cases. I mean, I think if you look at this, Ben was only coming in to talk. He was going to speak. Now, that's freedom of expression. There was obviously from his background no security problem, no violence issue, whatever, just a question of talking on a private visit. And I find this really very disconcerting.
Do you think it's because of the sensitivity in the run-up to this 5-year Congress in the mainland?
Yes, possibly, but, that should not affect freedom of expression in Hong Kong from somebody who has a perfectly respectable background. Usually, I mean, the general rule is security clearance is done for people entering any country, and obviously if there's a question of crime, violence, or whatever, this type of thing, they will not be allowed to enter. As in the Falun Gong case, well, they were banned on the mainland. How can we equate someone like Ben Rogers with these kinds of criteria for letting people enter any jurisdiction? I simply cannot make it square in my own mind. I find it really shocking.
Well, the mainland says, and I'm not saying this is a justification, that they're not prepared for Hong Kong to be a base of subversion of the mainland government.
But that's absolutely, but I mean, to talk about subversion of the mainland government in connection with Ben Rogers is, to me, absolutely ludicrous, because that is absolutely the last type of thing that he would be engaged in. So they may have that criterion, but I mean, it's, after a proper security check, that should absolutely not apply. And they're very able to get all the information. So I feel that they have lowered the bar excessively aggressively. I can't use adverbs strong enough to say how I think this is totally ludicrous in applying any bar on such a person. I mean, I've reached a point where, one of my friends has not been allowed to enter Hong Kong, and that to me is inconceivable, because the type of people I know are all respectable people who would not engage in any type of subversion. They believe in democracy. Yes, I have many friends who believe in democracy and freedom of speech. And so, once again, the only thing I can say is I was really, really shocked by this.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Susan, a caller on the line. They're bringing time to 21 minutes past 9. I think we're going to stick with this topic, and because we've got a lot of emails and interesting comments yet to air. You can join in by emailing backchat@rthk.hk or commenting on our Facebook page. A couple more comments from our Facebook page. Henry says, if I can just get Henry's message available. Okay, all states have the sovereign right to admit or refuse entry of any person and are not obliged to disclose the refusal reason. The usual reason including unwelcome, security concerns, etc. Under one country, one country, two systems. Hong Kong's immigration necessarily synchronised with that of the mainland in some areas. In Joshua Wong's case, the Court of Final Appeal said that previous sentence was not commensurate with the seriousness of the case and stressed the need to preserve the dignity of the rule of law. Benedict Rogers alleged that the government is acting under Beijing's instruction, called for Boris Johnson to press for the release of Joshua and others, and said he would visit Joshua Wong when in Hong Kong. For obvious reasons, both Hong Kong and Beijing would not welcome Benedict. The hypothetical case of Benedict being admitted entry would carry messages like China's sovereignty damaged, Hong Kong's rule of law tarnished, increased impetus to Hong Kong's opposition forces, and potential effect of Benedict's speeches, etc. It's a dangerous precedent. Carrie Lam, the Bar Association, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc., have all made statements on the case. Lord Neuberg, an eminent judge, said he wouldn't sit in CFA if he felt Hong Kong has no strong and independent rule of law and was free from government interference. Benedict's comments exposes his own stale mindset and no prior homework done on Hong Kong's legal system, including the Court of Final Appeal. To say Hong Kong, one country, two systems is weakened as a result is wrong. And someone who's calls themselves Vladimir Wu Mao says it's oxymoronic to speak of the weakening of one country, two systems. The one country has never been stronger and becomes stronger every day. Benedict Rogers is a destabilising foreign force, and as such the central government was defending the freedom of Hong Kong people when they banned him. All foreigners visiting Hong Kong should be vetted and banned by the liaison office, since the basic law clearly states that foreign affairs are our business, not Hong Kong's. That comes from Vladimir Wu Mao. You have to judge the extent of his tongue in his cheek, I guess, for those comments. Lawrence Moore, what do you make of what you've been hearing and the thoughts of someone?
I want to address a comment about a person who said earlier that Beijing should grow up. I think that what I should be saying is how strong a country is not how much damage it can take or it should take. How strong a country is how well it can resist coercions from foreign powers, how well it can resist sanctions imposed on it, trying to bring it to bear. So it seems that people have been wrong to say that. Bring in someone who caused less damages, no damages at all. You shouldn't be fear of it.
Right. So you're saying that because, and in fact, this was one of the emails we just read out as well, that because his made public comments attacking decisions made by the Secretary for Justice and rulings made by the court, that in fact he is a destabilising force.
Well, I must have to say, I must agree to that, yes.
So maybe Beijing was right.
But if that's destabilising, it's not very stable.
Sorry?
It's really unstable if you consider that destabilising.
Well, I mean, certainly it's a matter of judgment and discretion when it comes to decisions like that. But we don't know what he will be doing. Of course, the government in Beijing cannot stop him once his entry is granted to do things that he's at liberty to do.
Okay, here's a comment from Henry, who says it's absolutely outrageous to see the Hong Kong government ban the entry of Benedict Rogers simply because it wants to toe the line of Beijing to suppress voices from dissidents. On her comments about possible denial of Chris Patten's future visits to Hong Kong, I think as the poodle of megalomaniac Xi Jinping, Carrie Lam can only bark but can't bite. But I have to say I'm deeply concerned about the freedom I enjoy in this city after Lam came to power. In fact, because Lam is now in power, like many young people in their late 20s and early 30s, I've already decided to move to Australia. I've applied for its skilled migration PR visa because I'm genuinely worried about the future of this city's freedom, the rule of law, and all the pillars behind our prosperity, as it is patently clear that the Chinese Communist Party is encroaching on our political autonomy every day. That comes from Henry. And also on the topic of Carrie Lam's involvement, a message from Fergus, a longish one, is the subject line, Carrie Lam, Chief Executive, Chief Hypocrite. Fergus says, in a flash, yet another chasm of distrust with Beijing has opened. Lam has declared herself chief stooge of Beijing, totally nonchalant about the consequences of the Rogers case. She flippantly said it was nothing to worry about. That's spineless. Immigration was within the purview of the SAR within the basic law. The timing of the Rogers case, coming on the heels of her maiden policy speech, was sweet. It helps us figure Lam's mettle, or lack of it. That policy address document mentions the motherland no less than 9 times. Thus it should come as no great surprise Carrie has thrown in the towel to her masters on our immigration autonomy, or just plain autonomy, period. Her masters' fingerprints were all over the 88 pages. The same document mentions the rule of law no less than 7 times, plus transparency, human rights and Asia's world city. But we can see that all such laudable-sounding statements may now be fairly hollow. The good news is that this episode exposes the total hypocrisy of Carrie early in her tenure. The bad news is the high degree of autonomy is now plainly a sham. To purport that the denial of entry of Ben Rogers was a matter of foreign affairs is absurd, and so twists the meaning of the basic law. Any interpretation of it is now open to so much ambiguity. Lam said she won't speak about individual cases. That's plain nonsense. She regularly speaks on individual cases when convenient to do so, so stop evading a major question. The rule of law, Carrie, means you must give account. It's not a matter of national security, and if it is, God help us. Lam says China would not deny someone entry without real evidence. Just what is the evidential standard under her version of the rule of law when Beijing determines what that is? It's certainly not our common law standard, so by definition, the rule of law is sidestepped. It's rule by law. So, Miss Lam, produce the evidence then? No, she implied. To discuss this case would be akin to disclosing details of confidential government discussions about terrorism, she said. To use that example was unfortunate. Was Ben Rogers then a terror threat? Rogers was not told the reason for his denial of entry, in Hong Kong at least. That also does not sit with the rule of law, unless, of course, it's just the incompetence of the immigration officers who just obeyed a stop list. Lam did nothing to refute the proposition that Chris Patten could similarly be denied entry, implying that anything was possible. Chilling. What the rule of law should mean, Miss Lam, is that we have a reasonable degree of certainty and that everything is not up in the air. We don't want rule by threat. Stop the doublespeak, Carrie. You are the CE. The buck stops with you. Stand up for Hong Kong and stop the charade of empty maxims. That comes from Fergus.
Fergus seems a little harsh there, since the UK, as we already heard on the show, also bans people from entry and also doesn't give reasons. So,
that's a double matters. You don't give reasons because, I mean, many of the informations are not disclosable, even to a court of law, as I said before, even in Australia. To say one more point, there is a common national interest against subversion of the Hong Kong government as well as the as well as the central government. We have a common interest, common national interest against subversion. And if a person tries to come in on doing anything damaging the sovereignty status of Hong Kong being a part of China, we have a right to refuse them.
Edward Chin, do you want to respond to that?
Can I say something like how you define subversion then? I mean, like, if you want to define it, like, let us know what you mean by subversion then.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that this person comes indefinitely on the basis of, we don't know why the mainland government has made a decision on that, on what evidence and on what basis. But it seems that, judging from the statement of the Foreign Affairs spokesperson, he's going to intervene in Hong Kong's internal affairs, and then that would be a justification. I'm not saying directly this person is coming in on subversion basis or to conduct any subversive activities, but as I said before, you probably will not appear earlier in this program. Entry is not a matter of right for non-residents.
And it is interesting, of course, that the Chinese embassy reached out to him and said, on the basis of your past statements and what your past activities and your planned future activities, you won't be admitted. But he still got on a plane anyway.
Well, I mean, I would like to say, why, a person comes to Hong Kong, making it very clear that he wants to discuss with people here in Hong Kong on various issues. And discussion itself would be considered kind of subversion. Would that be anything reasonable or comprehensible at all? So I really think the word of subversion has been heard for many times in mainland China. I really find it very worrying. It also extends to Hong Kong.
OK, well, Edward Chin, thank you very much indeed for joining us, founder and convener of Hong Kong 2047 Monitor. Thank you to Patrick Poon, China Research with Amnesty International. And thank you to Lawrence Mars, a barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation, and to all those who called and emailed the programme this morning. And Mike, many thanks to you.
What a show.
Naturally, yeah. The weather forecast just before we go. It's going to be mainly cloudy today with occasional showers, sunny intervals forecast during the day. And the outlook, the weather will improve gradually. That's good news over the next few days. 27 degrees, the latest readings. The relative humidity is now at 94%.
Building management companies are responsible for implementing mosquito preventive measures in the public areas of buildings. Inspections must be carried out at least weekly. To prevent mosquitoes breeding in stagnant water, dispose of refuse properly. Cover water tanks tightly. Puncture anti-bump tires in car parks and clear drains. Prevent Japanese encephalitis and dengue fever. Act now.
9:32, the news.